Cari amici sportivi, welcome guys to a local soccer show special. Guys, tonight I'm super duper excited. I stalk this guy on every single social media platform that he owns. I'm even follow him on LinkedIn. I fall into this loop. I call it Dr. Rich's LinkedIn profile, and I get locked away and just taken to a real area of someone who I really admire because he has the knowledge, he has the structure, he understands, he's passionate, he's not as boisterous and maybe not as good looking as Stevie P, but he is well versed in everything that he says, and I wish that, other people would gravitate more to what he's saying because really honestly guys, it is a wealth of knowledge and I'm super excited to have him on. But before I bring him on, guys, you see, I'm decked out in Italy, guys. The Baggio jerseys are out. World Cup fever is coming, guys, and the place to get your World Cup stuff is Evangelista Sports. Guys, evangelistasports.com and Evangelista here in beautiful Little Italy, Montreal. Come and have a coffee. I'm gonna say have a cornetto. Dr. Rich is gonna get really pissed off at me, but have a cornetto, have a coffee, guys, and guys enjoy everything that they have. Beautiful apparel, club licensed apparel, guys, and they also have, thankfully, vintage pitch apparel, guys. Vintage pitch, guys, for you guys who listen to Milan Weekly Podcast, is a project of mine, passion project, along with my partner Nicholas Bagnoli, who is also an electrician. So we make these t-shirts electric for everybody, guys. Their club uh, let's say they're club inspired t-shirts and player inspired t-shirt, guys, that where the story is our tagline. Check us out, vintagepitch.com. But without further ado, we have Presidente in the background. Let's get started and bring Dr. Richard into the show. Dr. Rich, I have to say thank you so much for accepting our invitation. Thank you for joining us on the local soccer show. I think this is your second cap.
You know what? It's actually my third. You're very welcome. But yeah, I recall two others. So this is it's a hat trick for me.
It's a hat trick for Dr. Richard. Dr. Richard, please tell everybody who has lived under a rock and has not seen your great content, tell them what you do and tell them exactly how they can follow you and how they can get in contact with you if they would need your services.
Sure. Okay. I guess I'll make a long story short. I'm a coach and fitness coach and sports scientist, and I've had and continue to have a career in the higher levels of the sport, including provincial, national teams, and a few different professional clubs, both in Canada and internationally as well. And in addition to that, I run a business which is called Speed Training, and I didn't want anyone to be confused about what we do. We help try to make athletes run faster, soccer players, but also other athletes as well. And we do a wide range of fitness and physiological testing. Of course, we do training. We also do load management and load monitoring. We have a clinic that does physio, massage, chiropody, all of that. And I'm also a professor and a sessional lecturer at the University of Guelph Humber. So I teach in sports science as well. And I do some research and have a few interesting and exciting new research projects. Maybe we can talk about them as well in soccer and in sports science. So I'm kind of combining all these things that I love to do. So
Absolutely. And guys, please check him out. It is a wealth of knowledge. He's very modest in his words. It's fantastic stuff. Even for us, I call us regular humans. It's just a wealth of knowledge, and especially for coaches that want to do a little bit of this, sports science on their own, and and try to incorporate this at whatever level they're coaching. It's from all ages. I remember, Richard, I think the first time we met, you told me about, development age, which is something that I had no idea even existed. And now I've reached the time, and it's, again, it's correlated with your appearance for a third time, that it's time that I start calculating this the development age at my
Right.
team. So I'll be reaching out for sure. But
Absolutely.
Presidente put together a fantastic slideshow, and it's basically rooted around, Canada soccer and the grassroots standards that seem to be changing once again. We wanted to, pick your brain about your thoughts, and what we're going to be living in the near future with these changes. Grassroots is a very delicate area for us to navigate around. It does play a big impact. It's something that has changed quite a bit of times, if I have to be frank, from when I started coaching. You know, if we talk about, where they're going with these grassroots standards, just at a high level, Richard, if you had a chance to take a look at it, you know, are we heading the right direction? It's open-ended question, but it's the biggest question.
So, like any complicated question, the answer is it depends. I would say, okay, so I've read the document, and I've been involved as a coach educator for a long time. So I've seen kind of previous iterations of, we used to call long-term athlete development or long-term player development. And are we headed in the right direction? Yes, in the sense that there are parts of the recommendations and the theory and methodology that I like, and I agree with, and I think probably will really help. But no, in the sense that there are others that I think really could be changed. So I can't predict. I think ultimately the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And so we if we want to know, let's say, whether previous methodology or programming or whatever worked, we have to look at the results of the previous programs, and that means the players that we developed that came out of those programs, and the success that we had or have or continue to have, let's say, in our national teams and let's say professional clubs and professional players. And in this program, I guess we have to wait and see, is it going to be better or worse? Broadly speaking, I would say that probably the best we ever did as a nation. There are two eras that I could talk about. One, I was too young, but let's say the team in the 1980s that ended up qualifying for the World Cup in 1986. As I said, I was a little kid, so it's not like I was aware of what's happening. But I've got friends and colleagues in the game, and they could talk to you about the old NASL and all the ways that we had to develop players and professional players at that time. And the next level, which maybe we can speak more about, to me, which and I know because I was right in it as a coach and fitness coach and sports scientist, is the old provincial program. And I'm speaking about Ontario. I know what was going on in Quebec and other provinces, but Ontario, I live there and I work there, so I know it really well. The old provincial program, which we set up around the mid 2000s, and basically ran for a good 12 to 14 years or so before the so-called player development leagues, which I put air quotes with that phrase. So the products of that old provincial program, to me, and even if I take myself out of it, objectively, the product was better than the product from the changes that we made around 2013, 2014, 10 years ago. Now we'll see. I can't speak on it. I think we can go point by point. I'll tell you what I like. I'll tell you what I don't like. So yeah.
Absolutely, and again, it's open ended because of that. And I wanted to ask you this next question because I know you're a data guy. So, like, for me, I want to see data, right? I want to see and I know that in maybe in the 80s we don't have the actual data that can prove that whatever was done helped that 1986 team
Right.
qualify for the World Cup. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
What I do want to see is, and I think we should have, and if we don't have it, I think, that's a big problem, is what's the data that got us to this World Cup? Because it's not from the changes made in 2013 that we're living the fruits now. It's before, like you said. And again, I'm not on this show, and people who watch Milan Weekly podcast or who don't, go watch it. I'm not here to fluff Richard's feathers. The guy's good looking enough. I'm here to give my opinion, right? So whatever was done at, like you said, the provincial level, and we're gonna stick to Ontario because
Yeah.
I'm not gonna speak for Quebec. We're gonna stick to was fruitful because it got us to a level where these kids now at a mature age have done enough to qualify for a World Cup and be successful. What we see from now on, like you said, is then do we have that data though from the 2000s to say, hey, what we did in this program worked and got us to the World Cup?
Well, okay. So the first challenge is that the outcome, and if we want that outcome to be, how many players have gone on to play professionally, or maybe in first and second division in certain pro leagues, that's an outcome. Qualifying for the World Cup is an outcome. Winning, the women, our women's national team won a gold medal. I mean, whatever those outcomes are, we can think of those as dependent variables. Okay.
Yes.
And then we can think of all of the inputs, the number of training sessions per week, the quality of the coaching, the environment. Like, there's many different inputs. We can think of those as independent variables. And if anyone wanted to really, put their heads down and try to do this, you could try to say, well, can we quantify? Okay, first of all, whether any of these independent variables, and I just listed a few, but there's others, the way we structure our youth leagues, the training to game ratio, all those things. Can we quantify how each of those individual variables affected the dependent variable? And then can we build a model that combines multiple independent variables and says, well, what's the best way to predict the outcome or the dependent variable? And that's those are multiple regression models, and those are awesome statistical tests. The problem is it's hard to quantify.
Yes.
So I guess I will say right off the gate, I don't have data, but I do have 2 decades, let's say, of experience,
Yeah.
having worked directly in those levels. And these are some of the things, both from my anecdotal experience as well as some things that I did study, that I would say stand out to me. So
Yeah.
here's the first one. Player identification is a really, really important component, of course, when we're getting into whether or not our youth national teams are going to do well, and then our senior national teams and all of that. And so prior to these player development leagues, I put them in quotations again, prior to those leagues, in Ontario, we had a league called OYSL, Ontario Youth Soccer League, and we had a system with promotion and relegation. I believe it started around U12 or U13. Before that, there were kind of regional and leagues and whatever. And eventually, the best out of those teams got into the OYSL, and the teams from the lower levels, those teams had to win to get promoted, and the bottom two or so would get relegated. So we had that promotion and relegation system, and most of the players involved, most of the coaches involved, definitely by the late 1990s, everyone involved in the OYSL would have agreed. And I hope people watching, I'm happy to hear comments from anyone else that played in it. I mean, I played in that league in the 1990s, and anyone else, everyone would have agreed that almost all of the most talented players in Ontario were playing in that league. Okay. And it wasn't free, but it was cheap. I remember only because my father was a manager of the club, and I played in a very good club that, was competitive, was one of the better ones in Ontario for my age group. And we never paid more than about $500 a year. Now we're talking 1997, 98. I know there's
Absolutely.
inflation and okay, but it was affordable to the point where everyone could afford it. Anyone could afford it. And out of that league, the identification for the Ontario provincial program was done. And as I said, by the early 2000s, the Ontario provincial program, for my opinion, my professional opinion, was the best youth training program that I've ever seen in Canada. Here's why. It was, again, they had scouts that would identify players out of the OYSL where we knew most of the best players were there. We can't say that about these player development leagues now. At the time, we knew that they were there. We had a lot, I won't say all because there's lots of other good coaches. I don't want to disrespect people and friends and colleagues of mine, but a lot of the best coaches in Ontario, and in fact, a lot of the best coaches in Canada were coaching in the Ontario provincial program by the early 2000s. And I can list a few names: Joey Lombardi, Patrick Tobo. These are, guys that I work directly with, that really good coaches, experienced coaches, educated coaches. So that program identified players with competent scouts and coaches, and then they would train from the beginning of October to the end of May for 8 months. The provincial program was 6 days per week. 2 of those days were done with professional fitness coaches. I was one of them. Another very good friend and colleague of mine, I think you guys had him on your show, Paolo Paccione.
I think we did. Yes.
Okay, so he's connected to Montreal. He was the fitness coach with Montreal Impact for 3 or 4 years at the time that Alessandro Nesta and Didier Drogba were playing there.
And I think now, if I'm not mistaken, he's in either Mexico.
Well, he was, and now in Chile.
And now in Chile. Okay,
right.
So yes, we did have him on, and that was a fantastic conversation.
Yeah, I'm sure I saw it, and I'm sure everybody that watched really gained a lot of knowledge. He's even more. I call him a friend and a colleague, but he was a mentor to me too. Okay. And to me, he's the top. He's the best fitness coach and sports scientist that we've ever had in Canada. And of course, he made his career outside of Canada because that's what happens. But anyway, he was there. I was there. We had other, fitness coaches. So those players, okay, they got 8 months of a program that was 6 days per week, 2 days of top physical fitness and sports science. And we had everything even at that time. We had all of the latest technology to assess fitness. We even brought in people from the Canadian sports centers, people from universities. We conducted and published our own research from the fitness testing results. We had heart rate and GPS. So we were monitoring low. This is 10 years ago.
You were ahead of the game.
We were, and it's not being done now. So and then the coaching, again, it was top coaching, competent coaches. They were hired based on merit. It wasn't just this nepotism or hiring these people that have never coached before and putting them in leadership positions. That's not how it was. And it was 6 days per week for 8 months, and it was free. It was free. Players didn't pay.
You cut off there. Your connection's not good. It was what?
Can you hear me now?
No, I can hear you, but you said a word that I didn't understand.
I said it was.
What did you say there?
Okay, that was good. You got me. It was free. It was free. It was FREE, free. Players didn't pay. Okay, and then. And by the way, it wasn't just even the training. The competition was they would bring in university teams to play. They would bring, whatever the top clubs were for exhibition games. I was involved a lot with the women's programs, and including even, a few years after I got involved, I became the fitness coach for the U17 women's national team. We would play exhibition games against the best under 14 and under 15 boys teams. Because these women at under 17, they were too good to. There was no women's team in Canada that could compete with them. So they got the best competition that they could get, that they could afford to get. Okay, and then in the summer months, they got to go back to their clubs and play in the OYSL, which was a competitive league. Still okay. The coaching was. A lot of times you had parent volunteers, and I'm not against parent volunteers, but sometimes, maybe you didn't have always the best coaches, but you had a lot of good coaches in the game. In fact, even a lot of those coaches that were in the provincial program, because I'm talking 10, 15 years ago, a lot of us were not earning a full-time living,
Yes,
with our
and
coaching
it's
jobs. So
important.
yeah,
And it's important that we
yeah,
put that into context. Is it's
yeah,
important that you say that.
yeah.
10, 15 years ago, we didn't have this machine that we have now.
No,
Right? Now it's a machine, right?
yeah.
So and before you continue, what I would like to maybe add to your point, and maybe fuel a bit of your anger too, is that you're speaking of this program that's being run like a professional club. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? Because from what I see, and again, I live in Montreal. I'm not gonna pretend here that I've lived in Europe and I know what the European structure is. But through the grace of of the local soccer show, we get to talk about with a lot of people that are in a professional environment, and what you're explaining is exactly what the goal should be for the highest level of soccer played in Canada, is a stepping stone from the provincial to the national team, is be in a professional environment. But my question here, to add to your fury, is that if it was being run like this, Richard, why the F did we change? Why the fuck did we change?
I don't think that anybody at Ontario Soccer or any provincial association or Canada Soccer will admit this, but the reason that the old Ontario provincial program was replaced by the Player Development League is because people at Ontario Soccer and Canada Soccer realized that they could make a lot more money if they set up their own so-called pathway into the provincial and feeder systems to the national team and ran it themselves. So what I think happened is that I think that the Ontario provincial program, the people in charge there, they were influenced by Soccer Academy Alliance Canada. This is called SAC. I don't know if you guys in Quebec heard of this, but in 2006, okay, way before OPDL, whatever, there was a group of private academies, four of them in Ontario, and eventually it kind of grew from there. But
Mm-hmm.
these were private academies that had top people running them. Again, experienced coaches with the 2 or 3 A licenses and had coached in other countries and other environments, university, all of it, right? And these academies started to actually implement standards for the youth training that they provided. And the league, Soccer Academy Alliance Canada, implemented those standards across the league. They were the first ones to come up with age appropriate training, meaning at U10 it was 6v6 with a goalkeeper, 7v7. From U11, U12 it became 9v9, and then they went full field. SAC, the Soccer Academy Alliance Canada, was the first definitely the first one in Ontario to do it. I can't speak about Quebec, Alberta, other provinces,
Absolutely.
but in Ontario they were the first. Okay, they were the first ones to implement a 3 practices to 1 game ratio. Okay, they were the first ones to implement standards for coach licensing, meaning that the coaches had to have certain licenses, and they paid for their coaches to get licensed. I'm saying this because I coached in one of those academies, so I lived
Understood.
it. Okay. They even had standards around, like, they didn't allow parents or coaches to criticize referees. They were very strict about that. It was actually a really exciting time to be a coach. And I just basically finished playing in university, and I threw myself into coaching right away at that time. And so in any case, these were private academies. And so they were charging fees that already were in the thousands of dollars per year. So is it good? Is it bad that they charge fees? Well, I reserve my criticism of the fees. I don't think pay to play necessarily is a problem, because since they implemented those standards, well, okay, they had to have 3 practices a week. And in fact, those training sessions could not all be on a gym floor. They had to be on turf. And so that means, well, you have to pay to rent the fields.
Absolutely.
You start standardizing and professionalizing coaching. Well, that means the coaches need licenses. They're not going to work for free. Okay, the all of the insurance, they had to get their own insurance. Ontario Soccer didn't insure them. They had to get their own referees outside of the Ontario Soccer. So all of these, these were costs.
Absolutely.
But everybody involved bought into it because they believed in the quality, and at that time, honestly, the quality was good.
And
I
and
think,
just to,
yeah.
if I can ask a question too, if you're part of this SAC league, were
Yeah.
you able to play or be identified in the provincial program?
No. So in fact, not only, I mean, it's not just that you weren't able. The Ontario provincial program told any club or player, whoever, okay, they could not be part of the Ontario provincial program if they participated in one of the SAC clubs. So Ontario Soccer introduced their own rules prohibiting players from being identified into their provincial program if they were part of the SAC private academies. And again, I don't want to name names, but there's one very, very good Canadian goalkeeper, female goalkeeper, who was forced to leave a private academy because she was clearly good enough to be in the provincial and eventually the national team, and is still playing for Canada right now. And that's just one example. Okay, there are dozens.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that Ontario Soccer really didn't like it when that SAC organization was formed. And I believe that their OPDL, Player Development League, the model for how they set it up, they basically copied what SAC was doing because they saw what was happening and they said, we need to profit off of this.
Yeah,
This is crazy that this is being done and we're not getting any money from it. And again,
absolutely.
no one's going to admit that,
No,
but
no, no.
if you look at all of the so-called standards that were put into the Player Development League, I keep speaking in air quotes because
Yes.
I want to emphasize those points, right?
Yeah.
But if you look at the so-called standards, they were almost verbatim copied by what SAC had already been doing. Remember, the OPDL started in 2014. SAC was 2006. Okay, so it's 8 years.
8 years.
So yeah,
So again, and it's a very interesting conversation because
yeah,
this it boggles my mind because you're not going to identify someone just because of where they play. So if you have Lionel Messi in one of those SAC academies, he will not play for the provincial team and not play for the Canadian national team unless he comes out of that SAC academy.
right. And
A
that's
one,
yeah
A
that
one,
that's
A one,
that's
A one
that's
development.
that's how it was. And the truth is, Steve, that's still how it is now, because now players are told, if you want to be part of the development pathway, the Ontario provincial program, you have to be in the Player Development League.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
they're still doing that.
So the thing that this where it irks me and it hits me very hard is that they copied this structure from
Yeah.
what you're saying and implemented it at, for me, the very irritating part is that to copy that structure and those costs follow that type of structure, maybe a little bit less than what the academies would have to pay. And again, I know for a fact that in Quebec the word academy is taboo,
Yeah.
like you
Right.
can't use that.
Yeah.
And again, I understand,
Yeah.
I understand their reasoning for it.
Yeah.
What I'm lost at is two things. One, why the hell are we not identifying the best players, regardless of where they play? And two, don't you find that these structures, whether it be the SAC or whether it be at a club level now, we're outpricing our community? We will never be able to get the true best of Canada because let's face it, economic and demographics makes a big difference, and not everybody, Richard, can pay those prices.
Right. Yeah. So okay. The first thing, or the first question that you asked, which is, why are we not identifying the best players? Well, um, the way that the only way that we could identify who the best players are would be, first of all, we would need competent coaches and scouts. Okay. Now, when I say competent, I mean, I feel like I've said this so many times, I should almost patent it, but there are three things that go into competence as a coach. The first is knowledge, and really that knowledge has to be gained in coaching courses outside of Canada. because in the coaching courses in Canada, even the instructors are incompetent. Okay, so the first thing that makes you a competent coach is that you have knowledge that you gained outside of Canada. UEFA, CONMEBOL. I'm even interested in coach education in Asia and Africa, anywhere but Canada. Okay, that's one. Two is experience, and usually the best forms of experience are the highest levels. So college, university, semi-pro, professional, and international. Okay, and then three is, along with the knowledge and the experience, is a track record. So you should work your way up to the top position. And I mean, I'm not saying anything like this. This is not rocket science, right? This is the way, if you, by the time you become the president or the CEO of a company, or, you get a leadership position as a manager, director, you should have performed very well at all of the lower levels. And that's why you get promoted. So a track record of success, so a scout that gets to a top job, that's not just someone that has knowledge and experience, but that's someone that has successfully identified and if it's a coach, successfully developed talented players. So we can't identify all of the best players unless we have competent scouts that are knowledgeable, experienced, and have a track record. We don't have that. The closest we ever came to it was the old Ontario provincial program. Right now, I mean, I don't want to, throw names around or whatever, but almost all of the people in positions of leadership are incompetent. They're missing at least one of those three. Some are missing all three. Okay. So it would start with that. And then we really need to take scouting a lot more seriously, wherever the players may be. We can't bury our heads in the sand and think that all the best players are in the player development leagues, because everyone knows they're not. We certainly can't bury our heads in the sand and assume that all the best players are in the three MLS academies, which is basically how we so-called scout our youth national team. And listen, God bless them, they've done really well. They're qualified to the second round of the U17 World Cup. It's awesome. I'm as busy as I am. I'm making time to watch those games, and I love it. But how can we possibly assume that all of our most talented players play for TFC Montreal and Vancouver Academy?
Let's be fair. We can't bury our heads in the ground either and say that all our best players are in one of those SAC teams, right?
No, and definitely not.
And that's where, sorry to cut you off, and that's where it's important. Mm-hmm. Man, we need to start getting back to having conversations.
Right. So I really think that the government money, and even whatever the percentage of player registrations, we all know that the provincial associations and the national associations get lots of money. Could they get more? Sure. Should the government invest more? Absolutely. Should these organizations start looking more for private investment? And absolutely, all of that. Okay, there should be scholarships. We should get research grants. We should do much more. Lots of countries in Europe, the reason that they can fund their national teams the way they can is because the government invests. The Canadian government doesn't invest as much as they should, in my opinion, but we still have lots of money available to us. If we hired competent scouts and then we said, look, we know that there's good players in the player development leagues. We know that there's good players in the academies. We know, and I'm speaking in Ontario and Toronto, where I'm from, and we know that there's lots of good players playing in Spanish futsal leagues. Okay, that will never get into one of those high expensive pay to play models. There's immigrant communities all over the city. I know they have them. Lots of different communities in Montreal. I mean, so the scouts should be tasked with the job of finding the talented players wherever they are. And ideally, there would be really, really standardized, objective systems of measuring and quantifying the ability of these players. I have some ideas of how it can be done on the physical side. And I have even a few ideas of how you can try to, assess talent. And I know offline, Marcello Presidente and I, we spoke a bit about this too. So maybe I'll speak more. But, investing in scouting and taking scouting more seriously is the way we're going to identify the talented players. The pay-to-play model, I'm not sure that there's a solution in the sense that any program, I mean, if you wanted to run your own program right now and you wanted them to train 3 or 4 days a week, well, okay, you have to pay the field rentals, you have to pay your
Absolutely.
coaches, and it's not, the pay to play, or the fact that it costs, it is a problem. It would be great if it was cheaper, okay, or the costs were lower. However, the pay to play doesn't bother me nearly as much as the gatekeeping. And what I call gatekeeping is, again, what was done to SAC and what is done now, whereby provincial programs and the coaches and the people in charge will tell players, if you want to be in the Ontario provincial team, which leads to the National Development Center, which leads to the national teams. If you want to
Absolutely.
be in that pathway, and they call it a talented player pathway, you have to be in the player development league. Oh, and by the way, we're not going to tell you this, but we profit from that player development league.
Yeah.
So what
So
happens, this is what gatekeeping is. The provincial associations coerce players into registering for their talented player pathway, which they profit from. And I know for a fact that Ontario Soccer is getting millions of dollars from that player development league.
yeah. So
So to
I
me,
have
that is a conflict of interest,
yeah.
and there's no way to get around it without
Mm.
getting the bureaucracy out of the way.
I'm just gonna ask a question, and again,
Yeah,
I might be totally wrong here, but I know at the club level,
yeah,
for let's say I'm gonna call it Quebec,
yeah,
the club level, that club operates as a non-for-profit,
right.
right? I would assume, and I'm not again. I know assuming is very bad,
Yeah, yeah,
but I would think at the regional level it would almost be the same thing, and at the provincial level as well, right?
oh yeah, yeah,
So they're profiting. If they're profiting from these leagues,
yeah.
where is that money going?
Yeah, so I guess, and I'll be maybe I'll be a little bit more careful with my words, just to so the messaging is clear. Okay, so when I say profit, I don't mean that the organization is run like a corporation where they pay all their expenses, and what's left over is called profit, and the shareholders take it home. That's not what's happening, because in a non-profit, basically the idea is that the organization exists to serve the community. Of course, they have expenses. They pay their expenses, and if there's money left over, that can't be profit. That has to be reinvested into whatever it is, staffing, facilities, whatever. Okay,
Absolutely.
so where does the money go? I mean, I'm not the accountant of record, but what I can say is that there are lots of people that work in these organizations that are paid full time, and I'm not sure where the evidence is of the productivity of these people's work,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
Ultimately, it's up to the organization what they spend their money on. But if they were more efficient with their spending, then I go back to what I said before, which is that the proof of the pudding is in the eating. Okay, since the implementation of that player development league, do we have better players coming out of these provincial programs than we did 10 or 15 years ago? In my opinion, the answer is no.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of our best men's players that play in the national team now, they were good enough and they had connections to get themselves out of Canada and go to Europe in their teens, and that really accelerated their development. And there's lots of examples of that. In the men's game, it's kind of an unwritten rule. Everyone knows it. If you're talented as a teenager, leave.
Okay.
Okay. So of those that stay, is the product better than what it was?
Mm-hmm.
I would argue that it is not. And, so ultimately, I don't think that these organizations are efficiently and effectively spending the money that they take in. Okay. And so I think that the way around this problem that we have, this gatekeeping problem, is it's like any other government organization. It's too big. There's too much bureaucracy. And what happens when you have a large bureaucratic government, like, here we are, we live in Canada, we kind of see this, right? They don't do a good job running the programs that they're supposed to run. And a lot of the reason that they don't is because they have no incentives.
Okay.
A large, provincial sport governing body, is the let's say the person that has the title of manager of coach education or whatever, is that person actually held accountable to his or her job? Is there any like unbiased third party, or anyone even in the organization that can actually
Yeah.
assess the performance and the quality of that person's job and promote them if they're doing well, or fire them, or demote them if they're not? No. In fact, even if you look at a lot of the people in the top jobs, and in fact, I looked at this just recently. Canada Soccer has posted for another job, which they're calling manager of coach development, another one of these jobs. The standards and the criteria by which they're hiring are very low, and a lot of the actual writing, in terms of the job description and the responsibilities, they're vague.
Okay.
So these people, they probably don't even know what they're supposed to do. They speak in platitudes. They say, I'm going to implement the curriculum for the fostering of new developmental standards and practice. It's just a bunch of words that mean nothing.
Yeah.
Now, contrast that, and again, I use this example because I was in it and I know how it is. At least in a private academy, which is a for-profit business that we criticize so much, but at least in a private academy, the coaches, or the whoever runs the academy, what happens if they don't do a good job, and the players are not developing and the parents are not happy? What happens?
They lose their job.
Immediately they lose money. So they're directly incentivized to put the best possible quality product they can put out there. If a coach isn't doing well, they have to deal with it right away. If players are struggling, they have to because if they don't deal with it right away, they get the consequences of it right away. So I would argue, at least if we could get the bureaucracy out of the way, I think private academies can do a much better job of developing players. But I also think that the provincial and national associations, whatever money they do get, however they get it, needs to be invested in scouting and then in coaching education. And I'm happy to talk to you about coaching education, because that's another big weakness that we have. So
Absolutely. Before we go to that, I have maybe again, maybe it's just me thinking in simpleman terms. Has anybody ever thought of having like some sort of summit? I know that it's happened in hockey when results were not there, because it's very confusing to the clubs, right? Because I can talk for the non-for-profit
yeah,
clubs, right? It's we get this program. It's not about results. We don't have to win. It's about player development. I love this word player, and I use player development in quotations because I
yeah,
think it's a farce. I don't believe that we're actually truly doing that,
yeah.
because everybody wants to win the $2 medals. Everybody wants to take a picture and put it on Instagram, but are we servicing these kids? And I'm talking about the younger ages, from let's say 8, 9 years old to 13 years old, right? Then once you hit 13 years old, then results matter all of a sudden. Now where you've been let's say at the playground playing in the sand from 8, 9 years old to 13 years old, and now you're hitting the grass and it's promotion relegation at 13 years old. So
Right.
that's where it's confusing to me, because we're going from a very relaxed atmosphere where, like you said, there may or may not be parent coaches that are coaching there and have X number of. And now I have the Richard quotes
Yeah, sorry.
in my thing. No, but the parent coach now, who didn't have that pressure and who may have taken some courses to get to a level where, at 13 years old, it is a bit more. And I'm not saying 8, 9 years old is not competitive, but at
Yeah,
but at 11, 12 years old, now you're looking at, oh, I need to get ready because next year I'm in full-fledged competition. I need to qualify for the nationals. I need to finish first or second. I need to not be in the relegation zone, or I don't play in the top league. Like, what are we doing here? Like, what is it? Do you want to develop, or you want to be results based?
well, so first I would just argue that I don't think that any of us involved in the game should look at development and winning as if these are binary, and you either do one or you do the other. And that's first of all. I want to give you an analogy that I use in in my lectures, okay, and it's something I've been working on for a long time. I'm going to talk about it in terms of fitness and physical training, but then I'm going to apply it to kind of let's say the concept of competition and
Absolutely.
pressure. Let's say pressure. Okay, so with fitness training, one of the key principles in order to get results and not overtrain or undertrain. Okay, overtraining means you get hurt. Undertraining means you don't improve. So one of the key principles to avoid overtraining or undertraining is called the principle of progressive overload. And what that means is that the load that you expose athletes to, and load is like, we don't need to get into it. I could talk for 3 hours about it, but basically, you can think of it as, the weight that you lift or the intensity of the training and all of that and all of it, that you need to make increases in load, but those increases need to be incremental. And a real simplified way to look at it is you can think of the average load that you have over about 3 weeks or so. And then every 3 weeks or maybe 4 weeks, something like that. Sometimes that's called a cycle. If you've heard that term, that's what it is. Okay. So
Yes.
about every 3 to 4 weeks, then you make an increase of about 5, 10, 15, maybe 20% at the most. Okay. If you don't make an increase, then you're not overloading the body. Then that's undertraining. You don't improve. Okay. If you make an increase, but the increase is greater than 20%, it's unlikely that you're going to be able to sustain it. You either can't do it physically or you get hurt. And we call that overtraining.
Absolutely.
Okay. Maybe simple analogy. Imagine you've been bench pressing 100 pounds for 3 weeks. Okay. Consistently. You can go, after 3 weeks, you can go to 110. That's a 10% increase. Okay.
Yeah.
You can go to 115 maybe, right? 120 might be pushing it. You can't go from 100 pounds to 200 pounds, right? That's not too much. It's too much too soon. Okay. So if that concept makes sense, that's progressive overload. And that's the way we do physical fitness training to get athletes better. I would argue that we need to apply the same concept to the load, which is representative of stress from competition in athletes. Meaning we can't just, as you said, and again, this is how we do it now, right? So that's, if you're asking me about the new standards and Canada Soccer's new ideas and whatever, we can't just say it is development until 12 or 13 or whatever, and then after that it's competition. Because what we do there is we make the competitive stress, the pressure, all of that, right, really, really low, or in fact like non-existent.
Zero.
No scores, no standings, no festivals instead of tournaments, all of this, participation medals, the safe sport, all of it. Okay, it's like nothing. Okay, and then we go straight from that to, well, now winning is important. Now we want to try to make professional players. No. The only way that it would work, in my opinion, would be if we gradually, incrementally increased load or incrementally increased pressure. Because we always talk about, pressure to win as if it's a bad thing. Or like,
yeah,
I don't see it that way. I don't agree with the concept that pressure for young athletes is always bad. What's bad is too much pressure too soon. That's what's bad. And if we were to educate and train our coaches with competent instructors, well, those are the kind of concepts that we would end up, imparting to them. I give you several examples. I worked in South America, and I talked to people even in some of the top clubs there. And I also have been all over the world. I've presented my research at conferences in, literally all over the world. And I've talked to people from top clubs from many countries in Europe and all of it. Most of them will tell you in the academies, they need to develop and they need to win.
Yeah.
Both. And at some point, if they don't win, they actually do get punished for it. But again, if we applied the principle of progressive overload, we should be able to strike a balance. And I don't think we're doing it right now because we're still talking about those two concepts as if they're binary and you can either do one or do the other. And I don't believe in that.
Again,
So,
we talked about it,
yeah,
polarizing again, right?
yeah,
We're polarizing development and winning,
yeah,
and the importance of winning. Or also, Richard, I always say this, like, like I see things online, and again, for me, someone told me a very long time ago that you need to learn, whether you like it or not, you need to learn how to lose before you learn how to win. And it's important because life is like that. And I presented as a U12 coach to my parents, and I told them, the kids will need to learn how to lose in a very tough situation to in the future, whether it be win at soccer, their development, or Richard, I have a responsibility to these kids greater than the game, and that is make them win at life,
right.
make them good people.
Yeah,
You understand? And I keep on saying that, and I try to, you know, and again, I'm not in it full time. I appreciate what some guys do that are in it full time,
mm,
but it's becoming too polarizing of a topic that oh my God, what do you mean you want to win? Yeah, I want to win. And then it's like, oh, I want to develop. I don't care about the score. I don't care about the score. I lie to my kids all the time. I tell them I tell them I don't care about the score. But in reality I do,
right.
because the score reflects the performance, right? And then it helps me understand what I need to do to make them better. So the score deep down inside for me, and again, they'll have this forever and they'll call me out when they get married if they invite me. Coach Steve did care about the results because the results are important.
Yeah.
Participation medals, no, I didn't get that when I was a kid. No
Well,
one got that.
here's I mean I agree, and here's an interesting concept that again would come if we had competent coaching instructors teaching coaches. This
Let's
is
go
what
into that.
this
I want to know from
yeah.
you. I want to go.
So this is what would happen. Uh, we would be able to train and teach coaches really about putting both winning and losing into perspective. Okay, so what do I mean by that? I mean, well, okay, as you said, you need to learn how to lose, and you're going to lose, right? Because it doesn't matter. Everybody loses except one winner. Okay,
Exactly.
so what are the odds of winning? The odds of winning are always minimal, and the higher the level you go, the more difficult it is. So put losing into perspective, meaning um, regardless of the result, if you've lost, start to look at why. I mean, it could be the other team is literally just better. There's nothing you can do. It can be, you were trying to build out from the back. We can get into these retreat lines and all these things. You were trying to keep the ball more. You were trying to implement a certain strategy. The other team was, kicking the ball over the top and whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever it is. But then there's also going to be moments that you can say, well, no, but we lost a lot of 1v1 battles.
Yeah.
Okay, goalkeeper was not in position. I mean, whatever it is, right? The mistakes you made that led to conceding goals that led to the loss. Well, that's where your perspective comes in, and you say, yeah, it's not the end of the world that we lost. Coaches need to really, get that into their heads, and they need to get that into the players' heads, because again, we operate under the assumption that all these changes, all the softening of the game and of the kids that we're doing, because that's what
Yes.
we're doing. We're
We're
softening them
doing.
up, right? Okay. That we're operating under the assumption that softening them up is done because, if they lose, they're just, they're going to have no self-esteem. They're not going to believe in themselves anymore. They're going to want to quit, all of it. I don't agree with that. I think that the reason that kids and even adults take losing so hard is because they have an inability to put losing into perspective. Coaches need to train them to do better at that, and we need to train our coaches to learn how to do that. Also, the other side of it is put winning into perspective. Okay? And I've made this point before on other podcasts. I want to say it again here. There is no college, university, professional, or national team coach that cares whether or not your youth team won any games or lost any games. They don't care how many championship trophies the kids have. They don't care where the kids are playing. They don't care whether the kids are in player development league, this, that, whatever. And especially if you go outside of Canada, they don't even know what those leagues are. They don't know, and they don't care. They care about talent and, work ethic, character, all those other things.
Attitude.
That's how scouting and player identification is done at the higher levels. So what does that mean? That means we need to put winning in perspective too. It doesn't really matter if you have a special group of talented players and they happen to be in a league where they're better than everybody else and they're winning every game by 10 goals or whatever. In the end, it's not a sign necessarily that you're doing anything well. Put the winning into perspective. Did you just win because that gap in talent or whatever was so big, or did you actually do things well? And you could win without doing things well. So put winning and put losing into perspective, and that's my take on that. But I'm happy to speak more about coaching education.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's segue into Presidente's slides that we wanted to an hour ago.
We need to do that.
We'll go as long as we have to, and
Right.
we'll make this available to everybody because this is a great conversation. So the grassroots standard, Presidente and I took a look at the slides. He identified certain areas, and if we can go to the first slide, the Presidente, that you highlighted, which was, what we talked about there. The next one, the number of memorable events, so tournaments, the evil word of tournament. It's saying U7, you're not allowed going to U6, U7. We'll not talk about U4, U6, but let's start, U8, U9, which for Quebec, it's our competition levels. That's when things start going from recreational to competition, and again, it's competition with no standings, no stats, right? So U8, U9, 2 per season. U10, U11, 2 per season. U12, 13, 3 per season. What's your take on that?
First of all, I'm really against policing language. I don't know what a memorable event is. I do know what a tournament is. So I would argue that, the moment we start telling people, oh, no, don't call it a tournament, because then that implies that, well, there's teams competing and they're going to win. This goes back to this weird ideology that I don't believe in. We don't police language. Stop calling it a memorable event. Call it a tournament. That's one. Two, and more importantly, who cares how many tournaments young athletes are participating in? Okay? The only possible reason that anyone could say that they care about it is that they're thinking, well, it's too many games, and that means it's too much load, too high of a risk of injury. Okay, but again, I go back to what I talked about before, which is the principle of progressive overload. These are people putting these standards in place that know nothing about sports science. They know nothing about fitness or periodization. They use the word periodization, but they don't know what it means. Okay, the issue with young players is not that they're going to do too much, but that there might be a risk of doing too much too soon. Okay, I have young children. I don't know. I haven't talked to you guys enough, but maybe you have young kids, or your kids were young at one point. You're around young kids. You're coaching them. Everybody knows, especially before puberty, before peak height velocity, right? Kids are capable of exercising all day. They're capable of running around all day. In fact, they have a fairly large capacity to do physical activity. So often, what happens is that, okay, fine, their club tells them, 2 games a week, 2 practices a week, whatever. But if they're really going to develop as an athlete, you cannot ever assume that that's the only training or physical activity or soccer or whatever that you need. No, to become good at soccer, you need to be kicking a ball against the wall all day long. You need to be playing with your friends all day long. You need to be playing other sports and participating in other forms of physical activity. And in fact, children across the country are not physically active enough, and they're becoming overweight and obese, and those rates are going up, not down. So all of this is to say, I think possibly these people are not just completely incompetent, but they're trying to, put these standards in place in order to try to limit the number of competitions. But again, I would argue that if we could apply, well, we need to measure load, and that can be done, but you need competent people in charge. But if we were to measure load and the amount of, the volume of training, the intensity of training that these young kids are doing, we could progressively increase it to the point that it wouldn't matter whether they're doing 2 tournaments per year or 3 per year or whatever. Okay. And I just think this is sort of it's just a weird arbitrary number, as if somehow limiting teams to 3 tournaments. I'm not going to use that term memorable event. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean anything to
No,
me.
neither
Three
am I.
tournaments that somehow what happens if they play 4? Magically all of a sudden they're all going to break their legs or something? I mean,
I
do
don't
we
know.
do we know how many games are being played in these tournaments? Do we know the load? Do we know how much playing time? And by the way, playing time isn't the only issue, because I'll just give a simple example. Okay, if it's by U13, if they're playing 11v11, it looks like they are, right? But if that's the case, center backs don't run as much as fullbacks or wingers, which means they don't experience anywhere near the same physical load. What about goalkeepers?
Yeah.
Does it matter that they play 3 or 4 games in a day? I mean, like, it's like we're just burying our heads in the sand here and putting these arbitrary numbers in place without any thought to periodization of training load. And I've spoken to you about this before, without any thought of developmental age. We're
Yes.
just saying, well, U7 to U8 it's this, and U8 to U9 it's this, and uh, we would need to measure the developmental age of the players. We would need to measure and monitor training load. We would need to educate coaches about periodization. And I would argue that if we did all of those things, then these numbers would be meaningless. So to me, they're meaningless now because we're
Yeah.
not doing those things. So
If we go on to the next one, it's actually the format. So you said U12, U13.
yeah,
No, they will not be playing 11 aside. They
okay,
will be playing
9v9.
9v9.
Yeah, yeah.
The 9v9 format here, it says with or without a goalkeeper.
Mm.
I'm not understanding why we would be removing the goalkeeper here.
So I agree. I mean, I've got no issue with 3v3, 7v7, 9v9. I mentioned SAC did that a long time ago, and there's a good argument to be made about not just a smaller field size, but smaller numbers on the teams, because the smaller the numbers, of course, they're going to touch the ball more, they're going to interact more, and I think in a 3v3 or a 4v4, players can learn enough about, like, positions and tactics and all that they can figure things out on the bigger field when they get older. However, I have to agree with you too. I don't understand why taking a goalkeeper out is a good idea, because again, then, based on this model, we're gonna violate that same principle of,
Yes,
you
again.
know making incremental increases, the principle of overload. We're going to violate that again. We're going to say, well, no, there's no such thing as a goalkeeper, right? In training or games or whatever. Until when? Until 11? Until
Until
12?
from
Now there's a
here,
goalkeeper that can't catch, that doesn't know how to block or dive, or doesn't know anything about angles, and is just
yeah.
going to put their face in front of a ball that people are shooting really hard, and that's going to help somehow. Like,
So
why?
so
Yeah,
I have no idea. And again,
yeah,
I understand also that players can, should explore different positions to get used to the different touches of the ball around the field. I get that 100%. But now we're eliminating a very vital position in the game, which is the goalkeeper. It's a
right.
very specialized position. For me, this is absolutely insanity.
Yeah,
The other thing that I want to touch on, and again, this is my point to it, is I'm okay with the dimensions, and I'm okay with the 3v3, the 4v4,
hmm,
5v5, the incrementals that they're doing there, as long as we have the infrastructure for it. And what scares me is that at 9v9, I can't speak for Ontario, but I can speak for the island of Montreal. We don't have 9v9 infrastructure.
I
We have
know.
7v7 infrastructure, Rich. So what happens, Doctor, uh, is uh, is that we're cramming these kids at 12, 13 years old on a field that's 7v7. And yes, people are gonna say yes, but they're gonna learn tight spaces. Yeah, but then when they go to 11v11, you have to remove that tight spaces mentality to actually play the width and length of the field. So for me, this is absolute insanity, and I know there's probably there's probably like I'm not even understanding how they came to this unless it's only Montreal that doesn't have 9v9 infrastructure. I don't know, because there is a solution to this, and it's someone that I talked to in Europe to play
Mhm.
9v9. They play an 11 aside field, box to box,
Right. Yeah.
and they cut off a bit of the width so that it becomes a 9v9 field. But
Well, in
what
fact,
happened?
actually, the even you can use the width of the 18-yard box if you wanted to, or yeah, yeah. I mean,
Absolutely.
there's ways to do that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Flat cones and stuff
Right.
like that. I'm
Yeah,
okay with that.
yeah,
But they're not going to do it in Montreal because that reduces the amount of games, it
yeah.
reduces the amount of teams, and it reduces the amount of money. And then now we're back, Richard, and I'm pissed off because we're back again to money.
There it
And
goes.
this is what's pissing me off, right?
Yeah, yeah. So it's a good point. I mean, I'd like to think that um, Canada Soccer would have done some type of a tour of the country, an inventory, spoken to the provincial bodies and all that, and said, look, do we is this logistically possible? Right? You mentioned infrastructure, right? Do we have enough fields? I mean, I'm sure they have people that are good enough at math to say, well, there's this many teams, there's this many players, this is what we want the competitive season to look like with this many games. Do we have enough grass, turf, indoor, outdoor, whatever that we need to do this? Can the fields be split in this way? Because yeah, you're right. I mean, I saw 9v9 competitions done exactly in that way, and it's fine. I mean, it's a smaller field, it's still a rectangle, it works. But if
Absolutely.
each time you do that, you're taking up a full size field, and you don't have enough full size fields, yeah, you're right. You're gonna limit the number of games. It's gonna cost people money, and so yeah, but I don't know if all of that background work was done. So we'll see. And I hope that it doesn't become a big problem. But I'm not optimistic, again, because I worked in these organizations,
Yeah.
and I have seen firsthand how incompetent they are.
Yeah.
So
The
I'm not
the
optimistic. Yeah.
the other thing too is, and again, I'm speaking for the island of Montreal.
Yeah.
In theory, every net on the island of Montreal is non-movable on an 11-a-side field.
Okay. So there you go. Yeah. Yeah.
So so this needs to be like, it cannot be that Canada is not checking with everybody if this is possible. And if it is, we have a big problem.
Right.
So I don't want to dwell on this too much because the
No.
next 3 points are they're killers for
Right.
me. I've always said this, that I'm a purist of the game. I love the game the way it's played. I don't like fiddling with stuff. If we go to the next slide, Presidente, you'll see something called a game leader or referee. And then we have, no offsides till you reach the age of 11. And then we top that off with, you know what? We're going to have a restart line. Like, what the hell's happening here? What are we creating here?
Well, so this is one of those areas where I think that the people that are in charge of putting these standards in place are looking at what's being done in Europe, and then they're saying, well, look, there's, in England, they've made this switch in their academies to a retreat line because they're trying to encourage building out from the back. And so, well, if it works for them, and uh, in that model, then we need to do that here. And so, like, I understand the rationale, like the reason that they're doing it, but the problem with just looking at what's happening in another country and then sort of parachuting it into Canada is that, like I said before, if the dependent variable is, the outcome or the game or whatever, well, what are all the other independent variables? What are all the other aspects of professional academy soccer in England, let's say, okay, or even youth soccer that leads to the professional academies, that are different than Canada? And could it be possible that some of these rules and policies that they're implementing work over there because the environment is different, and maybe they're not going to work so well over here. So, I guess we can kind of go like step by step with these let's say rows and categories. So
The first one is the game leader. So like you said there, you don't like to police it. A
no,
referee is a
call him
referee.
a referee. Yeah, what's the problem? Yeah,
Let's not even
call him
waste
referees.
time on that.
Yeah,
The restart from the sideline is something that we've lived it now.
yeah,
But now we're going up until U10, U11. Like we're not introducing one of the facets of the game that's
right.
very important.
So
And then
here's my my point about that. I'll go back to the same principle of progressive overload. If we say restarts from the touchline until 10 or 12 or whatever the age is, and then immediately we go to throw-ins, well, now these players have not ever even done a throw-in before, possibly.
true.
So at some point, as you said, the sport has certain techniques that go into the broad category of techniques, and that includes throw-ins.
Yeah. And
I
again,
yeah, go on, yeah.
I've had different conversations, and I get the maybe not the dribbling in that, no, but I've seen Arsene Wenger talk about it. I've had
Yeah.
John Lemoniadis on this show, and he talked about it. And look, he proved me wrong. He said, Steve, wouldn't the game be more exciting if everything was a kick in? So now that throw in that's close to the opponent's box becomes a goal scoring chance. I agree with it 100%. Make it across the board, though. In the World Cup 2026, I want that stupid throw in to be across. And then
Yeah,
let's go then. No, Richard,
yeah.
let's go. Then we're heading in the right direction. But no, you tell these kids you're not allowed touching the ball with their hands to do something, and then at 12 years old, yes, you have to do a throw in. If we're gonna make a change, and sports have done it, hockey's done it, baseball's done it. If soccer wants to do something like that, it has to trickle from the top down.
Soccer
It
did it
can't.
too. So
Yeah,
we've done rule changes. There was the
yeah,
goalkeeper pass back rule. I mean, there are so and it changed the game. It literally changed the game. It made goalkeepers have to play with their feet and changed everything. So fair enough. I mean, to me, in this particular case, I don't like it. I think throwing the ball in is a technique in the game. I don't like the idea of eliminating it. I understand. Yeah, sure. It would make the game more exciting. It would make every time the ball goes out, it would be almost like having a free kick, basically, right?
yeah.
And if the ball goes out near the corner, it's a corner kick. So you probably get more goals. I mean, you see how good the good teams are at set pieces. So if
Absolutely.
it's certainly the case that there's enough players that can whip crosses in, and yeah, to me, it would change the game to the point where we almost wouldn't recognize it because we'd end up getting way more goals from, set pieces. So I don't like it in the senior game. And I think that building into it, we need to teach kids how to throw in the ball. This one I don't like. I'm also not really sold on the no offside rule for the same reasons. Like again, don't we want players? I get it if it's the 3v3 or whatever. I mean, maybe there's no such thing as an
Yeah,
offside in 3v3. But by the time you have goals with goalkeepers, and ostensibly you have at least two, if not three players that are playing in a defensive line, right? You don't have less than two.
yeah,
So at that point, don't we want the attacking players to develop habits for to look for the line and not just park themselves in a position where they're guaranteed to be called offside? I don't agree with it. And fair enough. I know that there's some evidence to show that they've implemented these things in other countries and all that, but as I said already, we don't exactly know, you know, whether or
why?
not the outcomes that other countries get are because of these changes, or whether those outcomes that they're getting are because of other variables which were not controlled for. Okay, these are not random controlled trials. These are not scientific experiments that we're doing. So I don't always like the idea of just saying, well, that's what they do over there, let's do that. And in fact, the big irony here, I've spoken to you guys about this before, right, is that there's lots of things that are being done in other countries, like measuring the developmental age of all the youth players, like competent coaching education, like sports science. Europe has been doing it for 30 years. They do it in South America. We don't do those things here. Here we still hire incompetent coach educators. We still, call our leagues development leagues, even though we don't measure development. The fitness testing and sports science, we say the word periodization, but we don't implement it here. So they're doing that in Europe and we're not doing that here. But somehow we think that all of these things are just automatically going to work in our environment. In my opinion, these are not going to work. And then you have
the retreat line.
To me, I think that the decision to play out of the back should be made when the opposing team provides you with enough space to do it. Just like the decision to make any other type of pass or build up that you want to do anywhere on the field is a decision that the player in possession and the team that's in possession makes based on what the opponent is doing, how much space is available, and whether they think they can pull it off. So again, we don't necessarily know that this retreat line is going to work, in the sense that are the players actually going to become better when they get to the point that there is no line, at recognizing those moments when they should build out of the back and don't. Because, Steve, you can train passing and receiving any way you want, so that the goalkeeper, the center backs, the fullbacks have the ability to pass the ball and you can do that in training. So it's the retreat line is not going to teach or develop the technique of, passing and receiving and making those passes.
It's just because
it's social engineering to me. That's what it looks like. It's something that's saying, well, they have to build out of the back because that's how we want to play, and so we're just going to force the other team not to press, so that the team in possession has the opportunity to build out of the back. How do we know that that's not going to build a bad habit?
100%.
Whereby, by the time, as I said, that they get to a regular game where there is pressure, that the goalkeeper is just automatically going to look to the side and they have no ability to actually recognize the moments that they should do it, and no ability to perform those passes and those movements under adequate pressure. I don't know that. Yeah. I'm happy to debate with some of the other coaching experts and whoever came up with this, but
I debate this all the time.
Yeah,
I've debated this ever since the beginning of the first time that I put on. I don't even have a whistle, but I have a stopwatch. Ever since I put on the stopwatch, I've tried to teach the kids, at least my kids and all the kids that pass through me, and from the knowledge that I got from guys who I really respect and really know the game. And some are coach educators at the provincial level, some are just old coaches that I had. Mm-hmm. And it's important, and now more than ever, I keep on telling them, you need to understand the moments of the game. There's moments to build out of the back. There's moments to play long. There's moments to press. There's moments to sit back. In whatever pitch geography you look, in whichever professional game you look, Serie A, EPL, the Belgian League, Ligue 1, we don't have a Manchester City team that can play out of the back. Professional teams don't have a Manchester City team that want to play out of the back. Professional teams don't have a Usam Dembele that can press and has 19 lungs on. I heard a story from a friend. We're not going to name any names. He has a very good girls team who love to keep the ball. He played against a team that was obviously weaker in competition. They were trying to copy what PSG does, which is basically the new fad. Kick that ball, try to get it between the corner stick and the throw-in to get a deep throw-in so you can apply pressure.
Right, yeah.
A friend told me, he's like, Steve, I didn't understand what he was doing. I want the ball. His girls got the ball, made 3-4 passes, scored. They did it 7 times. They got scored on 7 times. What did those girls learn, Richard? And now we want to play out of the back. We think we're Barcelona. We put our 2 center backs inside the 6. We make the center back play it to the goaler, and what's the goaler doing with it? He's booting it. I heard a great comment from someone in the EPL. It was an EPL podcast. He said, "We're just wasting time." He's gonna boot it anyways. We might as well boot it. Let's teach these guys about the moments. There's the moment to play the easy pass. There's the moment to play the tough pass. Let's look beyond the easy pass. Let's try to play a filtered pass, a through ball. Remember that word, Richard? Remember that term? Through ball? It was a beautiful thing. It's a rarity now. And I
Well,
don't know. I'm a project manager by trade. I am not sitting here saying that I'm the next coming of Carlo Ancelotti, and I chose Carlo Ancelotti because I'm a
yeah,
Milanista,
he's a good choice.
and I used to and he used to be my size. He's much thinner now, but the thing is that I'm realizing it here, and I do this part time.
Yeah.
Like, and I debated with people over and over. Guys, I'm not playing out of the back. I don't have the players to play out of the back. I need to look for balls that are gonna make me gain some advantage in the pitch geography just because of the team that I have. They'll learn other stuff. There's not gonna be 11 Ronaldinhos. There has to be a mixture of a Gattuso in there who's gonna be less technical but understands this. And
And
this
yeah.
stuff frustrates me.
Yeah, I feel it, and again, but I'll go back to, we talked before about how we should not make, like, it's just like an intellectual mistake when we think of, winning and development as if they're binary. We shouldn't make the same mistake of assuming, well, we either possess the ball and build out of the back, or we kick and run. Those are just two binary options, and you either coach the team and play one way all the time, or you coach the team and play the other way all the time. Here's the thing. um, there is not a high demand placed on technique to be able to play out of the back. It's just passing and receiving. There is a high demand placed on kind of the pressure and the ability to do it under pressure, and it's the whatever you want to call it. It's the defensive third, or now they're breaking the field into fourths or whatever they want. But it's difficult because it's risky, and fair enough. But if
Yeah,
a team is pressing you and you're capable of playing out of the back, you can break lines and it can be very effective. But ultimately, players, if they are coached well, and if they play a lot of free soccer, I want to speak about this before we move on. And
yeah,
but okay, ultimately they should learn when the right moments are to possess the ball and when the right moments are to try to move forward. And as you mentioned, through balls and break lines and all of that. Now, I am a scientist. I try to apply the scientific method to things, and I also try to look at what evidence I do know about. And in fact, I have studied motor learning a lot. Okay. And what we know from motor learning is that ultimately you develop certain skills, which, they look like, techniques, but they're actually decisions that you make. You develop them, in fact, by being exposed to scenarios enough times that you can predict what's going to happen. You can accurately predict the movement of your opponents better. You can accurately predict the movement of your teammates better. And then you can say, oh, I've seen that press before. Now is the time to play it wide or whatever. A lot of this stuff, it's been studied in soccer. It's really been studied well, for example, in sports like baseball.
yeah.
Okay. Something interesting. I don't know if you know this or not, but in women's, they don't play baseball. In women's, they play
Softball.
softball, and it's an underhand pitch, and they can whip the ball really hard, but it's about 10 to 20 miles per hour slower than an overhand fastball. But yet, the best men's baseball players in the world, they can't hit an underhand pitch. Did you know that?
I did not know
Every
that.
single, it's been done. It was done. It was really this real publicized thing. About 15 years ago, Mike Piazza and some of the
Yes,
MLB All Stars in the early 2000s, they hit against the U.S. women's softball pitcher, and she struck them all out. Okay,
that's
why?
amazing.
Because those, and it's not, again, he can hit 100-mile-an-hour fastball,
Exactly.
right, but he can't hit that pitch. Why? He's never seen it before.
Wow.
Okay, so that's a real unique ability. Motor learning is the science of the study of these things. How do we we study how people learn to do these things, and what is it that makes them good at it. We can call it predictive ability. Okay, so good baseball players, well, they know the moment the pitcher's arm is here or whatever, they know exactly where that ball is going to go. Goalkeepers do this in penalty shots, right? They,
Yeah.
sometimes they guess right, often they don't, but a good player can disguise, what he or she is going to do. But and if we use that same concept of predictive ability, and then we kind of expand that to, well, you don't just predict what's happening in these little 1v1 situations. Again, a good player, if they scan and they see, two defenders kind of closing in, they're like, okay, I've seen that before.
Yeah.
Right. And they don't tell you that. It's a subconscious thing. It
Yeah.
happens in a,
Muscle memory.
yeah, muscle memory is a good way to think about it. In fact, the term is central pattern governor, CPG. It's a stored movement. Okay. So they recognize that press and they say, okay, you know what? When this ball comes to me, it's going through those two. Right now, that can be applied to building from the back, but not if it's done with a retreat line, because the retreat line is artificially telling the other team not to press.
Not to press. Yeah, I agree. We're removing the muscle memory and the thing. I have a question. It's a little bit of a personal question, and it's just, so you talked about muscle memory. Now, Gianfranco, my son, he has ADHD.
Right.
Does that play a factor in maybe him not being as good at these these predictive things? It's just for me to understand. I'd like to talk about my son because I know he's diagnosed and so on, but I see it a lot with other kids that may not be diagnosed, and I'm wondering if that if the ADHD plays a factor in them developing this maybe later on, or it's too much for them.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I have to say I don't know
Okay.
exactly. I haven't seen any research that's been done on children with ADHD versus not, and but it's a very interesting question, and then there very well may be some evidence to show you kind of one way or the other.
I didn't want to put you in a corner.
No,
I asked because I had the audience to ask.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. So I would say that like the basic idea with attention deficit disorder is that there's sometimes an inability to focus, and maybe it's harder in school because in school you kind of have to sit for a long time. So often, in fact, like sports and physical activity, what I do know anyway is that these things that are tactile, you're using your hands, things where you're moving, sports, other games, physical games tend to be very effective with children that have ADHD, because what they struggle with more than anything else is sort of focusing on more academic work, and they struggle in school sometimes. But yeah, the ability to, like, the predictive ability, I don't know. I mean, what I do know is that ultimately you need a variety of stimuli. Okay, like think of baseball. You need, fastball, curveball, one pitcher. You need a variety of stimuli. You can't just get the same one over and over again. But you do need enough repetition of those different stimuli to be able to recognize. Just another great example that I've read about. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen the Last Dance documentary, the one about the Chicago Bulls. Go back or think back to the episode with Dennis Rodman, which was maybe the best rebounder in basketball ever, and how he was kind of talking about all the different ways. Like he watches the ball as it's in the air, and not only does he know that it's not going to go in, like he kind of anticipates that there's going to be a rebound, but he knows where it's going to go. While it's in the air. And so there's all these examples, and I'm giving baseball, basketball, whatever, but it's the same in soccer. I mean, a good player can watch a center back open up his hips, and right as he's about to strike the ball, the really good player knows exactly where that ball is going to go. So all these things. So you need to be exposed to those things. So ultimately, whether it's, ADHD or not or whatever, the key is in training, expose them to those scenarios. And here's the thing. I said you need a variety of stimuli. The stimuli also need to be unpredictable.
Yes.
Okay. Because literally, okay, if you already know the retreat line is happening, okay, now that area of the brain that's looking for patterns, the only pattern that the brain is seeing at that point is, oh, okay, they dropped off. Yeah,
Yeah.
but they were forced to drop off. They didn't decide to drop off.
Yeah.
Okay, and you're forced to play out of the back. So that ability, and again, it does come down to pattern recognition. That's eliminated. So if we understand that that's the worst thing you can do, it's the antithesis of randomness. Well, what's the total other end of the spectrum? If we want, and again, this goes back to the fact that in fact it's the random stimuli, the variability in stimuli that produces the best effects. What's the best way to do that? It's with free play.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so again, I go back to, we talked about how we're parachuting these ideas from Europe here. How are we so sure that the reason that the Europeans are better isn't because they've got more free play going on than us, independent of their youth coaching?
Yeah. Yeah. It's very interesting.
Does anyone want to study that? I mean, like
That's a
before we just accept the fact that, well, this is what they do in Italy or England
yeah.
or wherever, and we need to do that here, or
and
Spain.
and that's a
Yeah,
perfect segue to our last slide, which is
right.
no tryouts, no tiering. Before U11,
Yeah.
open the famous open roster. No scores or standings. No more traditional tournaments at U11 and younger. They're gonna be called either a memorable moment or a festival. This is we're taking it home there, Richard. I know you're a very busy man, and I've
I
kept you
got it.
very, very
I'm with
long.
you. No.
But let's start with the let's start with the no tryouts. It seems like tryout is another taboo word, especially here in Quebec. Can't try
Yeah.
out. You're
Yeah.
just attending. No tiering. Like for me, and speaking to people that I really respect, and stuff like that. At a certain point, we need to start having the elite play with the elite, and whether that changes or not is up to a whole bunch of, like you said, I'm going to use your terms, and I'm not the sports scientist, people. I just copy what Richard says in the right text, is that there's a lot of variables there, right? To if that player at 10 years old is going to stay elite or not, right? And you said some of the scientific facts, also some of the social emotional facts. Does he even want to play when he gets to 11? But now we're saying we're going to put everybody together. Whether you don't care about soccer and you're there just for fun, or you want to be the next greatest thing to Canadian soccer, we're going to put you together all the time up until 11 years old. I would just love your thoughts on that.
All right. So here's what I would say. I think this is using too much psychology and not enough harder science. Okay. And what I mean by that is I believe that a lot of these policies and rules that have been put in place are being put in place because we are operating under the assumption that it is bad for players' self-esteem, right? We're going to make them feel bad. We're going to hurt their feelings if somehow they're told that they are that, and let me say this, in the best possible way. The way I would say it as a coach, I would say, well, maybe their level of ability right now isn't equal to the level of some other players, which means maybe they should be in an environment where they're matched with their current level of ability to the others. Okay. And somehow we're operating under the assumption that the moment we do that, well, all of a sudden now we kill their self-esteem. Now, they're going to want to quit the sport. They're going to, all of this. I don't believe in it. I don't believe that it's true that when you tier or whatever you want to call it, that when you somehow, you separate players according to level of ability, that somehow that leads to everybody having no self-esteem, no self-efficacy, and wanting to quit the sport. All of it to me comes down to properly training and educating our coaches with competent coaching instructors to the point where coaches are able to communicate this stuff properly. Okay. It just doesn't make sense to have players in the same environment when the level of ability and the gap and the difference between level of ability is too large. I'll use the same principle of progressive overload that I talked about before. Okay, what happens if you have, I think we've all seen it. You can think of house league or whatever. Some kids, I think you said it as well, they just want to have fun. They're running around. They don't even have an ability to control a ball, pass a ball, kick a ball. It's just at the basic level.
Richard,
With
in
all
the
respect,
end,
now they can develop that ability, but right now they don't have it. And if those players are in the same group as those that are so far advanced, they're never going to touch the ball. They're just going to chase. And in fact, I would argue that leaving that gap, well, what does that do? That means that there's no progressive overload there. It's too easy for the ones that are more advanced. It's too difficult for the ones that aren't. I don't think it helps either group. Now, the way to do it properly, again, firstly, coaches need to communicate things in the right way. It's about your ability now. And second of all, coaches, we need to turn the mirror on ourselves and say, well, okay, hold on. Have I really objectively assessed the ability of these players? And that comes down to, does Canada Soccer, do the provincial associations train and teach their coaches how to objectively assess the ability of players? That is part of scouting, even if it's young players or whatever. Obviously, yeah, you're right. And any of the people you've spoken to, the ones that have worked in Europe or whatever, you can't predict anything about a player when they're 7, 8 years old. You can't even predict anything when they're 14. Because you don't know. I've seen hundreds of talented teenagers that did not become professional. And I've also seen dozens that I didn't really think much of when they were 14, 15 years old and went on to play, in professional clubs and, top
absolutely.
universities. And so it's not about predicting and cutting people out. It's about putting people in an environment that presents them with the appropriate level of challenge, with a challenge that's 5, 10, 15, 20% relative to their capacity,
Yeah.
rather than 100% relative to their capacity, or 100% less, or whatever, right? So that's not easy to do. I'm speaking about it as if it's like, well, it's
Yes.
very, it's hard, but that's the challenge of coaching. I mean, that we need to train coaches to be very, very clear, and not just to be able to identify and determine, discriminate between levels of ability, but to communicate that to a player,
Yeah.
you know,
The
so
message,
that so that they don't so that they don't
delivering.
lose confidence, so that they don't give up, right? But at the same time, so that everyone involved is realistic about the level of ability.
Yeah.
And I think that's a real challenge. I don't see that language in this document.
No,
I see the opposite of that. So
delivering the message is actually an art, and it's probably one of the hardest things that a coach has to do. On the negative side, probably one of the most rewarding things when they're delivering a message on the positive side. But we need to teach both sides of the envelope, right? And again, the other two is, let's I don't want to talk about the tournaments anymore. I'm done with that. The tournament is a tournament. Let's just move on.
yeah.
But the standings and the scores, like, I know we touched upon it before, but like, what are we doing to the generation of kids that are not understanding the, standings and score? And I know we touched on it a bit, on how we can't go from 0 to 100, but now you're saying no standings and scores again. What's the data that supports this decision?
There is none. This is based on, at best, misinterpretation of uh, you know research, or but again, this is psychology, and psychology is tough because we're talking about the mind. We're not, you can interview people, you can look at
Yeah,
behavior, but it's not the same as physics. It's not the same as physiology. It's just not. It's not even the same as motor learning. because even motor learning, you can, there's a lot more things you can quantify. Okay, so at best, it's just a misrepresentation of information. At worst, honestly, it's just pseudoscience. Like where is the actual evidence? Okay, that because you have scores, okay, because you have because you're keeping score in a game, okay, at any level, that somehow the fact that you're keeping score means kids don't develop, kids don't build confidence, kids lose motivation, all of it. Again, I go back to the same thing. If you are a coach and your team loses, even your team loses by a wide margin, it's your job to put that loss into perspective. And if you do that, why would we think that all of a sudden everyone's just going to go home crying and quit the sport and whatever? I don't agree with it, and I don't see any actual evidence to support that this method is better. And at the same time, we have to teach them to put winning in perspective, as I said, and ultimately, and funny enough, I'll bring it full circle here, right? Because we talked about the implementation of OPDL and before that, how we had this OYSL, which was cheap and all the best players were there. Again, I played in that OYSL, and then when I started coaching and working with players in my business, I worked with thousands of players that played in it. Okay? I don't remember ever playing in a game where the margin of victory, one way or the other, was more than 4 goals. And I don't remember, it's possible, but I don't remember seeing any game where the margin of victory was more than 4 or 5 goals. Yeah. What does that mean? Well, that means that the ability and the competitive level of the players, of the youth players, was at least closely evenly matched. Yeah. There were no blowouts. You know what's happening now in these leagues in Ontario? In the Player Development League, in the I model, whatever, these names that we think that if we put some fancy name or acronym beside a league, all of a sudden it adds credibility.
Makes everything better. Yeah.
So you know what's happening? Some games are, and I'm not kidding you, I've seen it. I watched my nephew in the summer. 18-0.
Oh my God.
27-0. Now, the soft science people will look at that and say, wow, that's why we shouldn't keep score, because now they're going to go home and say we lost 27-0. You tell me, if you're a kid on that team that can't get put 2 passes together and get the ball out of the back, okay, can't get the ball over the half line, you think you don't know that you got outcompeted just because the website doesn't publish the score? You think you don't know? You think you're not, when you're walking to pick the ball up out of the net for the 20th time?
They know the score.
Yeah.
I don't have the data.
Yeah.
I wish I did, but I do, because I see it. I know that even though the league is not keeping score, the kids are keeping score. They will tell me exactly what the score is.
So the coach just needs to put it in perspective, right?
Yeah,
that's all.
Yeah. Richard, I wanted to ask you one last thing there before I want to give you some time to talk about some of your your research that you're doing. Like, I think that's important that people are going to be exposed to that before we close off. My last question there, and again, we say no standings, and you said the 27-0. Could it be that we just didn't identify, or the people identifying the team that lost 27-0 just didn't do their job properly and just put in a team to put in a team?
I think definitely. But the larger, like the bigger picture, and I think that the root cause of this is because we have this bureaucracy in place. Everybody, why did they put the team in? Because they can make money. I mean, right? Why does Ontario Soccer push them to put the teams in? Because they make money from it. So, at some point, if we, there's no utopia, okay? If we got the bureaucracy out of the way, then we would be more likely to have parity. That's all. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying, that everything would be perfect after. But I am saying that the more bureaucracy we have, the more likely it is that these things are going to happen. And I just want to throw this out there because, and I'll speak about it. If you ask me about my research, I'll speak more about it. But
Yes,
um,
we
high
can go straight
school,
into it. Go
okay,
straight into
all
your
right.
research.
So, there's a few projects I have on the go, but I'll tell you just about one which I found out about it just because I saw a post on Instagram, and I really liked it. And it's a believe it or not, my former landlord, before I moved my business into a bigger location, I was in a soccer facility, and my landlord, who runs that business, but he's also a high school principal, so he's involved in the education system
Mm-hmm.
and all that. And he put a post out there that he's starting a organization. It's a non-profit organization called Ontario Scholastic Soccer League, and basically they are trying to raise money to bring in coaches and paid coaches and sports science and all that, but to bring that into the free public, and in this case is the Catholic school, but free public/Catholic school soccer teams that already exist.
Mm-hmm.
And again, public school is free. Maybe if kids play on sports teams and they travel, there's a small fee, but it's not $5,000 a year or whatever. It's
No.
so and not only is it free, meaning it's accessible to anyone because everybody goes to the school. Everything about school sports and school soccer is set up so that you could have a real minimal bureaucracy because, well, where does one school compete? Well, they compete in a very, very local league against the
Yes.
neighboring schools. And when they win that league, if they do, well, then they go to the next level, and eventually there's a provincial championship, and that system is already in place. And not just that, but then you look at the let's say the time of the day and all of the challenges. I mean, we didn't really touch on it, but the truth is, I'm in it. I see, youth sports where you've got every night of the week traveling to training games, whatever, every weekend, out of town games, all, this puts in fact a load on players that
Yeah.
is a little bit unsustainable, right? So,
And the parents.
and yeah, of course, yeah, the ones that are driving them and paying for everything. Okay. And so if we focused our attention more on school sports, well, when do they train? Well, they train at 8 o'clock in the morning before school starts. A lot of them, they have the opportunity even to train during the school day, because we all know that kids don't need 6 whole hours of sitting behind a desk
Mm-hmm.
and all of it. So in fact, that soccer practice or weight training or whatever, if they do it during the school day, it's very
Yeah.
beneficial, right? And on top of it, or they train, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and they're done at 4 or 4:30. They can go home, they can have downtime, they can be with their family, they can do all those things. So anyway, I really liked it. I saw it and I liked it, and I messaged him and I said, I want to be involved, and here I am
Amazing.
now. Now I'm involved. So
I mean, so
so
we
yeah,
have something similar here, and I can
yeah.
speak for myself. My son does it. It's called Spotitude. So it's
Sportitude. I know all about
exactly.
it. Yeah.
It's a sports program that
Yeah.
basically the kids do 100% of the course load and 75% of the time. They start regular like every other school kid. They just finish at 12 and make their way over to a complex of depending on where you are in the city,
Mhm.
and they will train with the rest of the kids that have, again, it's a paid service, so
Yeah.
I'm paying for it,
So you do pay.
and
Yeah.
I do
Yeah.
pay.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's fantastic because like you said, and again, I spoke honestly and candidly about Gianfranco.
Mhm.
With ADHD, he cannot stay in the schools. He cannot stay in his seat for 6 hours a day. And it
He's not the only
was,
one, though. He's not the
yeah.
only one. Even if you don't have that attention deficit disorder, we know that it's not good for kids to be sitting down all the time. It's harder on boys than it is on girls, but it's not good for either sex. And on top of that, not only is it not good to sit, it's very beneficial to be physically active.
Yes.
Okay. And so, like, go back to like the two real problems that we have in terms of identifying and developing talent. And I mean, I keep speaking about things in terms of developing the next national team player or professional, and we all know that that's the 99.9th percentile. But
Yeah.
regardless, it's like that's where my head is at. The two barriers are money and time.
Yeah.
Okay. And so if done right, programs like this OSSL, because basically what they're doing is they're a nonprofit like all the others. So that means they can apply for grants and they can, and if they can raise enough money to bring in professional coaches who, by the way, most don't work during the day. Most of
Yeah.
them are coaching with clubs and whatever in the evening. So they have time available and they'll happily go to coach and train kids at 9 in the morning, or they have to fit it in their schedule,
Absolutely.
but they'll do it if they're paid to do it. Why wouldn't they? Right?
They're
It's extra
generating
income.
revenue.
It's income.
It generated revenue and income.
Right. And so that program, it eliminates the barrier of time because kids are already in school and the games are local. The travel is not the parents driving them. They get on a school bus and go. Like it's all taken care of by our tax dollars. Okay. Right. And it eliminates the financial barrier because it's free. It's public school. It's free.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I really like it. And, anyway, it's just starting. But I'm involved there as a sports scientist, but also kind of as an ambassador for it and building it and just promoting it as an alternative. And I am going to be collecting data from the players in training and games. It's starting with a real small group, literally just one high school, and eventually kind of building out from there. But we're going to start to collect data, and we're going to start to compare some of the physical and physiological data from these athletes to some of the others that are in the kind of the standard club environment. So
amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Richard, as always, it's always a fantastic honor and pleasure to have you on. We will have you on again. You'll get your fourth cap. But before we sign off, please let people know how they can contact you if they need your services and anywhere they can follow you on your socials.
Okay, so first of all, yeah, thank you very much. It's my pleasure and my honor to speak with you guys. I'm happy that you provide me with a platform, and I love the discussions, and I'm happy to do it again. So please, don't don't think that I'm too busy or I don't want to or whatever. It's fine. My kids are asleep, so I should be okay. So where can people find me? Well, I've got my company is called Speed Training. So speedtraining.ca is our website. Speedtraining.ca is our Instagram account. Okay. And if you want to find me, because, I'm also doing my own stuff, my own interviews and videos and podcasts. And, I'm doing videos where I talk to my phone now and I put it online. Maybe some people like to hear me talk. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's just my name, Richard Bucciarelli. You can find me on Instagram and you can join the discussion because I really I think we need to have these discussions, and
Absolutely.
I think you and I agree on most stuff, but there's maybe a few things we didn't. But I'm even happy to and open to, and I want to speak to people who disagree with me.
Absolutely.
I really want to, and it's not to put them down or insult them or whatever. I want to.
No.
To me, I'm very passionate and a big believer in free speech.
Yes.
And I think that the only way we come up with better ideas, like if I have a bad idea, but I think it's a good idea, and that's
you need someone to convince you that it's not a good idea.
That's
and
Canada
I'm a believer
Soccer.
of that too. Yeah.
Right. Canada Soccer has lots of bad ideas, but a lot of them, I think they really believe that those ideas are good. So how do you, change those people's mind or bring people maybe onto your side? You do it by, discussion and debate and all of that. And as I said, if people want to find me there and talk to me and challenge me, great. If they want to agree with me, okay, fine. But I don't want to just speak to everybody all the time that agrees with me.
No.
And
that's not healthy.
It's not opportunity to
and that's not healthy for you either, right? Because like you said, you need to be challenged. Again, it's intimidating also to, whether we like it or not, it's intimidating to challenge a doctor who has all this knowledge, and it's a big fact. The thing that strikes me with Canada Soccer and stuff like that is it's that old saying, right? A good GM is gonna hire people that are gonna challenge his decisions and convince him that his decisions are either not good or he's going in the right direction, or support him and challenge him on ways to get better, right? If we're just vanillaing this whole thing, and I just made up a word, and no one wants to challenge the status quo, then who knows if we're going in the right direction.
Right.
That being said, guys, I want to thank everybody who's going to listen to this, tomorrow. Listen to it in your car, listen to it live, get to see this fantastic Richard, this mega model that's on the screen. You get to see me as well. Guys, it's Milan Weekly Podcast is our YouTube channel. Guys, you need to subscribe. You need to hit the notification bell. You need to share it with your friends, guys. Yes, we talk Milan, but we do great stuff for local soccer. Thank you again to Presidente in the background for getting, again, Richard as a guest. And guys, like we said, spread the word. If you have people that you wanna see on the show, hit us up. We'll be more than happy to get in contact with them and have maybe a different conversation and maybe one day have this magical debate that Richard wants and live on Milan Weekly Podcast and the local soccer show. I want to thank you again, Richard, for being on. Thank you, Presidente. Buonanotte, and ciao a tutti.
Ciao.